Matthew. And he comes to the disciples and finds them asleep and says to Peter. So clearly he's going to the three, not all the other disciples further away, but just the smaller group that are more near. Mark, and he comes and finds them sleeping. So it doesn't say to the disciples. Luke, and there appeared an angel to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling to the ground. I've always wondered why people try and explain that it is literally possible to sweat blood, so it's not a made-up story that Jesus is sweating blood, when it says, as it were great drops of blood. I always understood this as like giant beads of sweat. Like if you're bleeding so much that it would drip, that has to be a lot of blood. Not that he's actually bleeding, but that he's sweating so much it's dripping from his face. It's profuse sweating. He's in deep distress. Not that he's necessarily bleeding, just heavy sweat. So I just want to mention that. Anyway, and when he arose from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow. Well, that's new. I don't ever remember reading that. Huh. And he said to them, why sleep you? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. And while he yet spoke, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12. Okay, so this should be the last time Jesus comes to them and finds them sleeping. Because it says, while he spoke. So what he spoke just before. Why sleep you? Rise and pray. In Matthew and Mark, he finds them sleeping 3 times. The 3rd time is when the group arrives. Although it's kind of weird because in Matthew, the first time he comes back, he says, what, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray. So that's close to what he said in Luke. Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. Watch and pray, that you do not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away. The 2nd time, prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, your will be done. He comes back, found them asleep again. This is the 2nd time, for their eyes were heavy. He left them, went away again, and prayed the 3rd time. It even says that, the 3rd time, saying the same words. Comes he to his disciples and says, sleep on now. This is the 3rd time. Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. So that's kind of strange that he says to them, sleep. Then the next verse, rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that does betray me. While he yet spoke, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came. So this in Matthew says the 3rd time he comes to them, he's saying, sleep now and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. I know there's a strange thing going on there, but the bigger issue is that Matthew, this is the 3rd time he's saying sleep. He's not saying pray. However, in Luke, it only makes sense for it to be the 3rd time that he's speaking, because it's while he had spoke, behold a multitude. And Mark, how does that compare to Matthew? He comes, find them sleeping, and says, Simon, sleep you, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak. Just the same as Matthew. I also notice it's very similar to what he says in Luke. Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation, right? The 1st time. Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. Goes away, 2nd time, same words. We returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, neither knew they what to answer him. He comes the 3rd time. So it doesn't mention that he goes back and prays, but it does mention that he returns the 3rd time, so it's inferred, right? He says what it says in Matthew, sleep on now, take your rest, it is enough, the hour is come, behold, the Son of Man is betrayed. Rise up, let us go. Lo, he that betrays me is at hand. And immediately while he yet spoke, comes Judas. Okay, so I read all that because it's strange that he goes off and prays and returns to them 3 different times, right? In Matthew and Mark, the first time he comes back, he says a certain set of words that match very well with Luke. Luke only mentions the one time Jesus goes and prays and comes back. Because the words are so similar, I will combine that with the first thing that Jesus says. The words are too close. In Matthew and Mark, it is again almost word for word what he says the third time he comes back. And those words are just not there in Luke. Even though it does seem like that should be the third time he comes back to say something, because it says right after Judas arrives. But the words are so different, I'm just going to combine the similar wording and then make the arrival of Judas be after the third. It is a bit strange according to what is said in Luke, but it makes sense according to Matthew and Mark. So Matthew, and he comes. Mark, and he comes. Luke, and there appeared an angel to him from heaven. So also another question, where should this interaction go when there appeared to him an angel from heaven strengthening him? It does come before the words that are supposedly the first time Jesus appears back to them. However, Luke doesn't have those 3, so maybe it is just before the third time he goes back. Now it says, when he rose from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping. Found them sleeping. That's mentioned in Mark. No reason why. Matthew comes to the disciples, finds them asleep. No reason why. The second time he comes back, found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. There is a reason given there. And the same thing in Mark. This is the second time, for their eyes were heavy. It wouldn't make sense for their eyes were heavy and for sorrow. So I'm going to have the first time come back is when they were sleeping for sorrow, which means all these verses from Luke I'm going to put first before he comes back. So starting with Luke, and there appeared an angel to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Now, and when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples. Matthew just has, and he comes. Mark, and he comes. I could have and combined. He combined, rose from prayer and was come to his disciples. So this and is all 3. Back to Luke, when he is all 3. back to Luke. Rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples. Oh, wait a minute. I think that's in Matthew. To the disciples. Mark, he comes and finds them. I will have disciples instead of just them. And Matthew has 2. So 2 is also Matthew, which makes this orange. And instead of the disciples from Matthew, I'll go with his disciples. But disciples are still both Matthew and Luke, orange. Matthew continues, and finds them asleep. Mark, and finds them sleeping. Luke, he found them sleeping. So sleeping is used twice instead of asleep. He found them, or because the phrase here is was, past tense from Luke, I gotta continue with past tense found instead of finds, even though finds is used twice. Actually, I could just get rid of was and have comes. And when he rose up from prayer and comes to his disciples, he finds. Could it work? Rose and comes to his disciples? Yeah, that could work. I'll do that. I'll get rid of was. And now this part is all 3, but the S at the end is only Matthew and Mark. Now just Luke, another he. And it's going to be finds from Matthew and Mark. That's the whole point of the work was. Finds them sleeping. Them asleep. Luke. Them sleeping. So them is all 3. And sleeping is Mark and Luke, not asleep from Matthew. Luke adds for sorrow.